One night, this woman, her name's Ellie, she goes out with some friends. And while she's out, she meets this guy, Jordan. And they're all drinking and they're having a good time. And by the end of the night, Jordan ends up taking Ellie home. Except that Jordan doesn't actually take her home. He takes her somewhere else, somewhere she doesn't recognize. And there is where he essays her. But unfortunately, she doesn't report it to police. She says she's too afraid. 2 months later, Jordan shows up one night to her apartment. And for some reason, she lets him in. And there is where he pulls a knife on her and he beats her up and he essays her again. But this time, after he leaves, she does go and report it to police. And luckily, she has proof. Crazy enough, she has screenshots from Jordan's Snapchat messages, where he openly admits that he essayed her. So police, they eventually go and arrest Jordan. But then he gets out on bail. And one night, while he's out on bail, he breaks into Ellie's house and he essays her again. So she tells police and police go and they arrest him again. And they throw him in jail and he's there for about 10 weeks before they ultimately let him go due to lack of evidence. Now, since Ellie has the police's ear, she feels it's the right time to confess something else to them. She goes and tells them about another separate incident that happened to her. Years before, back when Ellie was 12, she had met this much older guy at sort of a family gathering, and his name is Mo. So she and Mo, they become friends, and Mo eventually starts trafficking her, taking her from place to place and forcing her to do horrible things that I won't get into. And Ellie wasn't the only one. She says Mo has done this to tons of other girls, at least 60 other girls in fact, and he's involved in some kind of larger trafficking ring. And so Mo trafficking Ellie, this goes on for years, from the time she's 12 and to when she's well into her teens. And of course, Ellie has Snapchat messages to prove all of this too. So she shows all these messages to police. So police see this and they fear for Ellie's safety. So they put her in a hotel so that none of the traffickers she just outed can find her. Well, unfortunately for her, some of the traffickers she outed eventually do end up finding her. And they order her to get on a train and go to Blackpool immediately. So she does. And in Blackpool, she meets up with Mo, the original trafficker. And Mo ends up taking her to 4 different hotels where she is essayed multiple times by a bunch of different men. Now police, they eventually notice Ellie's missing. And they go to Blackpool and they find her and they bring her back to the original hotel. They also eventually arrest Mo and they throw him in jail. 2 weeks later, police take Ellie back to Blackpool. And they're like, okay, show us where the traffickers took you. Let's retrace all your steps so we can finally bust this trafficking ring. And Ellie's like, all right. So they spend 2 days driving her around town. And Ellie points out a few places to them, but the locations she's pointing to and the details she's giving them are suddenly really vague.
Was it on that route that you took us on, or was it somewhere else?
I don't know.
Not sure.
And by the end of this trip, police have no more information than when they started. And it's at this point that they look at Ellie and they start to get suspicious. So they go and they search Ellie's phone. And they find that, yeah, she actually had been at a hotel in Blackpool. But it's a hotel that she herself booked, which doesn't line up with her trafficking story. They also find CCTV footage of her shopping at various local stores in Blackpool, which also doesn't line up with her trafficking story. And this is when police realized that Ellie hadn't been trafficked at all. She hadn't been SA'd at all. She made it all up. All of it, all the way back to Jordan, the guy who she accused of essaying her 3 different times. Even the Snapchat messages that she would show police as proof, they were all fake. She just made them up herself. She would even go as far as to beat herself up and put marks on herself to show police as proof. And it is all complete bullshit. And so police are like, all right, this woman is crazy. Let's go arrest her. So they go to arrest her, but suddenly, Ellie is missing. No one knows where she's at. No one can find her. Meanwhile, Ellie has taken a train to Preston. And there, in the town center, she befriends a random, really drunk dude. His name's Oliver. So Ellie and Oliver, they immediately hit it off. And they start flirting, and they kiss a little, and they kind of hook up, and then they exchange numbers, and they part ways. Then Ellie gets on a train, and she goes back home. And police, they show up there, because they've been looking for her. And she tells police that Oliver, the guy she just hooked up with, she tells them that he trafficked her. She claims that some traffickers forced her to go to Preston and meet up with Oliver, and that Oliver took her somewhere where they met up with some other men, and those other men essayed her. And that then some of those men beat her up. And of course, she has marks all over her. Marks that she made herself. So police, they have to go track down Oliver and investigate him, just in case any of these crazy accusations turn out to be true. Regardless, boom, they arrest Ellie, and they charge her with perverting the course of justice. But pretty quickly, Ellie gets out on bail. And once she's out, she's right back to her old tricks. Because one night she goes to a local store and she buys a hammer. And a few days after that, she takes that hammer and bam! She smacks herself with it, right across the face. And then she does it again and again and again, until her eye's all red and swollen. Then she takes that hammer and smashes her own finger until it's partially severed. And then she goes out to some random field and waits until police, they eventually find her. And of course, she lies and tells them this whole story about how she was trafficked again, and then taken to a house, and then essayed by a bunch of random men, and then they beat her up. So of course, police, they take her to the hospital because she's all beat up, but once she's discharged from the hospital, she goes home and she takes pictures of herself all beat up. Then she gets on Facebook and posts those pictures, and she writes a long detailed post basically claiming not that she hit herself with a hammer for attention, but that the night before some gang of Pakistani groomers trafficked her and beat her up. And so then people on the internet see this crazy long post and these horrible pictures, and they have no idea that police had already determined that Ellie just makes all this stuff up. So her friends on Facebook, they see this post and they believe her, and they start sharing it, and her post starts to blow up. People are sharing it over and over again, and it goes viral. And someone starts a Facebook group called Justice for Ellie, and that Facebook group gets 100,000 followers, and they're quickly selling merchandise to help her out with a purple elephant logo that says Justice for Ellie, and there are stickers on cars and on windows and on notebooks, and like everyone around town has one. And people get together and they crowdfund 22,000 pounds, or about 28,000 US dollars, to help pay for the prosecution of this fictitious Pakistani grooming gang that she just made up. The internet is just going wild over this. But here's what's crazy though. Pretty quickly after making that Facebook post, Ellie gets arrested again, this time for breaking her bail. Here's her mugshot. And so she's arrested, and this crazy internet mob starts accusing the police of trying to cover up this whole fictitious trafficking ring, and that they're trying to silence her. And they're like protesting outside the police station, chanting Justice for Ellie. Like, it is nuts. All over some shit that she provably made up. Oh, but that's not even the worst part. All the men she accused of SA before they were fully exonerated, Ellie's false accusations destroyed their lives. Jordan went to jail for a while, of course. People found Mo and they destroyed his property and his business was ruined. And he eventually tried to unalive himself. Thank goodness he didn't. While Oliver, he's so devastated, he tries to unalive himself too. And he eventually gets put in a mental hospital. So these dudes have their lives just torn apart. The good news is, eventually, Ellie does get caught and this all goes to trial. And she's found guilty and she's sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. It's a crazy one. Shout out to England.